Imagine cooking in your food truck when a massive bear breaks in, or waking up in the wilderness to find a bear inches from your tent. What would you do? In these stories, ordinary moments turn into terrifying encounters with wild bears. From a mother's desperate plan to save her son on a family hike to two friends defending themselves in an abandoned cabin, each tale reveals the raw danger of facing nature's most powerful predators. So join us as we share 6 intense stories of survival, fear, and unexpected bear attacks. On the evening of September 27, 2024, in northern Sweden's quiet, cool countryside, Marcus prepared to close his food truck for the night. Marcus, a dedicated chef with years of experience in fine dining, had made a name for himself by leaving the confines of traditional kitchens to start a roadside food truck. Located at the edge of a popular campground near a dense forest, his truck attracted locals and travelers. Known for his unique blend of local and exotic flavors, Marcus's dishes filled the air with enticing aromas, drawing in customers and making his little truck a favorite stop for miles around. The night was typically calm, but for the chatter of a few remaining customers and Marcus's cooking tools clinking. He was focused, his hands moving quickly, slicing vegetables and stirring sauces with the ease of years spent perfecting his craft. The savory scent of roasted garlic, herbs, and sizzling meats floated through the air, mingling with the crisp forest breeze. Marcus enjoyed these late hours, often working in solitude with only a handful of dedicated customers who appreciated his late-night creations. He had just begun packing the leftover ingredients when a sudden noise broke through his concentration. Unlike the usual forest rustling, a loud clatter sounded from the back of the truck. The noise was deep and resonant, as if something large had knocked against the metal of his food truck. Marcus's heart jumped, and he paused, the knife in his hand hovering mid-air. He listened closely, hoping it was just a passing animal or perhaps the wind, but the noise grew louder, followed by a strange, scraping sound that set his nerves on edge. He gathered his courage and slowly approached the truck's rear to investigate. What he saw when he peeked through the window was enough to make him freeze in place. A large brown bear stood outside his truck, enormous and wild. The bear's massive frame nearly blocked out the moonlight, its thick fur bristling as it sniffed the air hungrily, clearly lured by the lingering aroma of Marcus's cooking. The creature moved closer, its powerful paws leaving heavy prints on the ground. Marcus felt his stomach tighten as the bear's nose twitched, following the scent trail toward the truck, inching closer and closer. Marcus could only watch, his mind racing about what to do next. The truck was his only shelter, but it was hardly designed to keep out a creature as strong as a bear. He knew the smell of food was a powerful draw for animals, especially during this season as bears prepared for winter. He had seen them from a distance, but never this close, and certainly never this determined. The bear's presence outside his truck was thrilling and terrifying, a raw reminder of nature's force. The bear began pushing against the truck's back door, its weight causing the metal to creak and groan under the pressure. Marcus backed away, looking around his small space for something he could use to defend himself if it broke through. He could feel his pulse racing, each sound of the bear's paw or snout against the truck amplifying the tension. The bear's strength became clearer as it continued pushing against the truck, and Marcus could feel the walls of his small kitchen shaking. The noise grew louder as it clawed at the door, determined to reach the source of the rich scents lingering in the air. The intense hunger of the wild animal seemed unstoppable, and the truck's thin metal walls now felt flimsy against the raw power of the bear outside. Desperate, Marcus scanned his cramped kitchen for anything that might help. His hands shook slightly as he grabbed a broom, knowing it was more for comfort than defense. The bear's snout was now poking through a gap in the door, and its large, dark eyes scanned the inside of the truck, catching sight of Marcus. For a brief moment they locked eyes, and Marcus felt a chill run through him as he saw the hunger and instinct in the creature's gaze. Suddenly, the bear pushed the door wider, shoving its head and shoulders into the truck. Marcus stepped back, pressing himself against the counter as far as he could, feeling completely cornered. The bear sniffed around, its nose twitching as it smelled the food that had spilled from containers during its entrance. With no time to think, Marcus swung the broom to scare it, but the bear hardly noticed, more focused on the food than on him. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, voices could be heard from nearby. A group of late-night customers, drawn by the commotion, approached, their flashlights casting light beams toward the truck. The bear looked up, momentarily distracted by the sudden brightness and noise. Realizing he had a brief chance to escape, Marcus moved quietly toward the truck's side door, carefully opening it while the bear's attention was diverted. With a final glance at the bear still rummaging through his supplies, Marcus slipped out of the truck, stumbling as he hurried toward the group of people. They quickly understood the danger and began making loud noises, hoping to drive the bear away. Their combined shouts and flashlight beams finally broke the bear's focus on the food. It lifted its head, giving one last look at the group before retreating into the forest, disappearing into the shadows as silently as it had arrived. Marcus stood there, his heart still racing, watching the spot where the bear had vanished. The group around him murmured in shock, realizing how close they had all come to witnessing a tragedy. The truck was a mess, with supplies scattered and shelves knocked over. But Marcus felt an overwhelming sense of relief, grateful to have escaped unharmed. The night's events left him shaken, a reminder of the delicate balance between nature and his small roadside setup. In the days that followed, Marcus took extra precautions. He began storing his ingredients in airtight containers and installed stronger locks on the doors of his truck. News of the encounter spread, with regulars returning to hear the story firsthand. Though Marcus rarely shared more than a few words, the memory of the bear's gaze and its raw strength stayed with him, a haunting reminder of how unpredictable life near the wilderness could be. On September 15th, 2024, Ava, a seasoned solo camper deeply appreciating the untouched wilderness, set out on another camping trip in Alaska's state park. She had ventured into these rugged lands many times before, each visit strengthening her respect and understanding of the wild. Alaska's state park, known for its dense forests and scenic mountain ranges, felt like a second home to her. Ava loved the solitude and beauty that each visit offered. Over the years, she has perfected her camping skills, always taking extra measures to protect her campsite from curious wildlife. As night fell, Ava prepared for another peaceful evening surrounded by nature. She had taken every precaution, storing her food in a bear-proof container and setting it safely from her tent. Her routine had become second nature, and she felt secure knowing she had done everything right. The air was crisp, and the silence of the wilderness was only interrupted by the occasional rustling of leaves and distant animal calls. After hiking and exploring, Ava felt content, settling down in her tent, wrapped in her sleeping bag, her flashlight by her side. However, in the stillness of the night, a faint rustling pulled Ava from her light sleep. Her senses sharpened, and she lay still, listening intently. The sound grew louder, each crunch of leaves outside her tent heightening her alertness. Then she heard something unmistakable, a large animal's heavy, labored breathing, moving closer to her tent. Ava's pulse quickened. Despite her careful preparation, a bear seemed drawn to her campsite, possibly catching a scent of food or simply investigating her presence. Ava stayed calm, reminding herself of everything she knew about bear encounters. She knew panic could escalate the situation, so she controlled her breathing. The bear's snuffling grew louder, and she could feel its weight pressing against the ground as it approached the tent. The animal's curiosity was evident as it sniffed around where she had stored her food. The bear-proof container held strong, but the bear was determined, its paws scraping against the ground, searching for anything to offer a meal. The minutes felt like hours as Ava lay still, assessing her options. She knew bears were intelligent creatures, and while they could be relentless in their search for food, they often moved on if they found nothing of interest. She considered making a noise to deter it, but worried this might provoke the bear further. Instead, she remained silent, listening closely as the bear's paws shifted closer to the side of her tent. The thin material between them felt inadequate, and every fiber of her being urged her to flee, but her instincts told her that staying calm was her best chance. The bear's curiosity grew as it pushed its snout against the tent, pressing against the fabric. Ava could feel her heartbeat racing but fought to keep her composure. She tightened her grip on the flashlight, knowing it could be her only defense if things escalated. As Ava lay completely still, every nerve in her body was on edge. The bear continued to press its weight against the tent, sniffing and pawing at the thin fabric that separated them. Each sound seemed to magnify in the silence, the bear's heavy breathing blending with the soft rustling of the tent material. Eva knew one wrong move could draw more attention, so she steadied herself, breathing slowly and quietly. The bear was persistent, scraping and nudging around the tent, testing the boundaries of its newfound curiosity. Her mind raced through everything she knew about bear encounters. She remembered reading that making yourself appear non-threatening could often make a bear lose interest, but staying silent and still was just as crucial if it became curious. Eva didn't dare move, each second stretching longer than the last. She could feel the tremors of fear in her muscles, but willed herself to remain steady. The bear's curious prodding at the tent eventually slowed, and Eva held her breath, hoping it would lose interest and move on. Finally, the bear shifted its focus, moving away from the tent but still exploring her campsite. Eva could hear it rummaging through the area where she had set up her belongings, though her food remained safely stored in the bear-proof container. She knew that if the bear didn't find anything appealing, it might eventually leave. She continued to wait, resisting the urge to peek or make any sound that might alert it again. The minutes dragged on, and slowly, the noise of the bear's movement faded into the distance. Once she felt certain the bear had left, Eva allowed herself to exhale deeply, the tension in her body beginning to ease. She waited, listening to ensure it was truly gone before carefully sitting inside the tent. The encounter had left her shaken, her mind replaying each moment of the close call. She knew the bear had only acted on its instincts, drawn by the smells around her camp. Eva also realized that despite her preparations, the wild held unpredictable dangers that no amount of planning could entirely prevent. As dawn broke, she packed up her campsite, her hands still slightly unsteady from the night's experience. She knew she had been fortunate, and the encounter left her with a renewed respect for the wilderness. Reflecting on the night's events, she understood more deeply the need for humility and caution in nature. She returned to civilization with a story to tell and a quiet reminder of the raw power of the wild, grateful for the chance to walk away unharmed. On September 14, 2024, the Carter family, Rachel, her husband Tom, and their 9-year-old son Theo, set out for an adventurous day at a national park in Montana. They had planned the trip for months, drawn to the park's rugged beauty and scenic trails. An avid nature lover, Rachel wanted Theo to grow up deeply appreciating the wilderness. Tom, a quiet yet strong presence, was thrilled to support his family's love for the outdoors, eager to make lasting memories together. A spirited and curious boy, Theo saw the park as an enormous playground. Excited by the vast open landscapes and towering trees, he felt a sense of freedom he rarely experienced back home. While his parents enjoyed the view from a trail overlooking the forest, Theo had begun to play a game of hide-and-seek with himself, darting between trees and hiding behind rocks, letting his imagination run wild. Rachel and Tom kept a close eye on him, but the excitement of the park made it easy for Theo to slip out of sight. It was midday, and the sun shone brightly, casting dappled shadows across the forest floor. The peaceful sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves filled the air, creating a sense of tranquility. Lost in his game, Theo darted further into the trees, his small footsteps blending into the sounds of the forest. Rachel and Tom noticed his absence, but assumed he was nearby, exploring within earshot. However, as a few moments passed, a faint, distant sound pierced the air, making Rachel's heart skip a beat. It was Theo's voice, carrying a note of fear she had never heard. Rachel's motherly instincts flared instantly, and she looked at Tom, who had also heard the faint cry. Panic surged as she called for Theo, her voice echoing through the trees. There was no response. She quickly glanced around, scanning the forest for any sign of movement. The park's serene atmosphere shifted, replaced by a looming dread. Her feet moved almost independently as she hurried toward Theo's voice, with Tom close behind, both fearing the worst. As they rushed forward, Rachel spotted a clearing ahead, her heart pounding, and there, only a few yards away, she saw Theo. He stood completely still, his eyes wide with fear, as he faced an enormous grizzly bear. The bear stood on all fours, its powerful frame towering over Theo, a dark, intimidating presence in the sunlit clearing. The distance between the family and the bear was enough to make any approach risky, yet too close to ignore. Rachel's breath caught as she took in the sight before her. Every instinct told her to run to Theo, but she knew one wrong move could put them all in even greater danger. Tom gripped her arm, his face pale but calm, signaling her to stay still. They exchanged a silent understanding. This was not a situation where they could afford to act on impulse. Each movement had to be thought out, and each step was deliberate. The bear's attention was fully on Theo, its massive head lowered as it sniffed the air, picking up his scent. Rachel's heart raced as she fought to remain calm, struggling against every urge to call out. She and Tom needed to act as a team, carefully choosing their actions. Tom bent down, gathering a handful of small stones and twigs, hoping to distract the bear without provoking it further. He tossed one lightly to the side, causing it to land with a soft thud in the grass. The bear's ears twitched and it turned its head slightly, giving Theo a brief but valuable moment to back away. Sensing the opportunity, Theo took a slow step backward, his tiny movements nearly silent. Rachel silently encouraged him, her gaze locked on her son, willing him to keep calm. But the bear's attention flickered back, and its body tensed, showing signs of aggression. Rachel felt a wave of helplessness wash over her, knowing that every second counted and they ran out of options. She glanced around, her mind racing, hoping to find something to buy them more time. Realizing the urgency, Tom took a bolder approach. He moved a few steps to the side, making himself more visible to the bear. His strategy was risky, but he hoped to draw the bear's attention away from Theo, giving his son a chance to retreat. The bear's gaze shifted to Tom, curiosity and caution visible in its dark eyes. Tom held his ground, maintaining eye contact, showing neither fear nor aggression but signaling his presence firmly. Theo used the distraction to move slowly toward his mother, one careful step at a time, his gaze never leaving the bear. As he inched closer, Rachel's heart filled with relief, but the tension remained thick. The bear huffed, lowering its head again, but appeared less interested in Theo now. Sensing this change, Rachel continued to guide her son back, both of them moving as quietly as possible. After what felt like an eternity, Theo reached his mother's side and she wrapped her arm protectively around him. Tom took another cautious step back, maintaining his stance until he was sure the bear was no longer focused on them. Gradually, they continued to retreat, staying together, never letting their guard down. The bear remained in place, watching but making no further moves. Finally, after a few tense moments, the bear turned and lumbered back into the trees, disappearing into the forest's shadows. The family stood in silence, the realization of their close call settling over them. Rachel held Theo tightly, gratitude overwhelming her. They knew this encounter would be etched into their memories forever, a reminder of the thin line between wonder and danger in the wild. Their awe of nature was forever paired with a new respect for its unpredictable power. On September 19, 2024, the dense forests of Alberta were shrouded in a thick, lingering fog. Ron, an experienced hunter with decades of skill, carefully navigated the familiar terrain. Hunting had been part of his life since his early 20s, and over the years, he had developed an acute sense of respect for the forest and its inhabitants. The silent, unyielding beauty of Alberta's forests had taught him many lessons, and today he was determined to track a mature elk he had spotted days before. Ron moved purposefully, equipped with his trusted rifle and a keen sense of direction. He had always hunted ethically, ensuring he caused as little disruption to the wildlife as possible. But as the mist settled in thicker than ever, his visibility became severely limited, making it hard to distinguish shapes and distances. He trod cautiously, knowing that any misstep could lead to unexpected consequences. The forest was silent, the usual rustling replaced by an eerie stillness, broken only by his quiet, steady steps on the damp forest floor. Suddenly, a massive shadow appeared through the fog. It was larger than he anticipated, but with limited visibility. He assumed he had finally found the elk he had been tracking. Without hesitation, he aimed, steadied his breath, and fired. The shot echoed through the trees, and as the shadow moved, Ron's heart dropped. Instead of an elk, an injured grizzly bear staggered out of the mist, an unmistakable look of pain and fury in its eyes. He had made a grave mistake that he knew could cost him dearly. The grizzly's roar tore through the fog, and Ron's instincts kicked in. He knew his danger. An injured bear was unpredictable, and now it was hurt and angry. Ron quickly calculated his options as it started to charge, realizing his best chance was to put as much distance as possible between him and the advancing bear. He turned and sprinted, his heart pounding as he pushed through the thick forest brush. Each step felt heavier than the last as he raced against the animal's furious pursuit. Ron's mind raced, struggling to reconcile his actions. He was a hunter but respected the wildlife he pursued, and this misstep weighed heavily on him. As he ran, he could feel the bear's presence behind him, its powerful form crashing through branches, unyielding in its pursuit. He knew he had to stay calm and find a way to lose the bear before exhaustion took its toll. He spotted a narrow path to his right, partially concealed by dense shrubs and fallen logs. Ron ducked into the path, hoping it would provide him some cover and slow the bear's approach. He crouched behind a large tree, steadying his breath, trying to control the noise and blend into the forest. The bear's growls echoed closer, its heavy paws crunching through the forest floor. He thought he might have lost it briefly, but then he heard it sniffing the air, searching for his scent, determined to locate him. At that moment, Ron felt a pang of remorse, unlike any he had experienced in his years of hunting. The grizzly's pain was his doing, an unintended consequence of a split-second decision. As he remained hidden, he knew that the real test lay ahead, not only in outsmarting the bear, but in coming to terms with the responsibility of his actions. The bear's growls grew louder, and Ron's pulse raced as he crouched behind the thick tree. He knew he couldn't stay hidden forever. Every second wasted meant the bear could get even closer, and the narrow path he had chosen provided limited escape routes. Glancing around, he spotted a steep slope just a few yards away. It wasn't an ideal option, but it offered some distance. Gathering his strength, he moved cautiously, keeping his steps quiet, praying the bear wouldn't catch his scent as he maneuvered toward the slope. Just as he reached the edge, a heavy rustling in the brush signaled that the bear had picked up his trail. Ron didn't hesitate. He slid down the slope, digging his boots into the earth to control his speed. The rough descent tore at his clothes and scraped his skin, but he was focused only on putting as much ground as possible between himself and the bear. The slope bottomed out into a dense area of trees and thick underbrush, giving him a brief reprieve. For a moment, all was silent. He strained his ears, listening for any sign of the bear's presence. A low grunt echoed from the ridge above, reminding him he was not out of danger yet. The bear's pursuit was relentless, driven by pain and the instinct to confront the perceived threat. Ron knew he needed a plan, something to redirect the bear's attention. He scanned his surroundings, looking for anything that might help. His eyes fell on a large broken branch, thick and sturdy. He quickly gathered it, gripping it tightly as he positioned himself behind another tree. He knew it wouldn't be a true weapon, but perhaps it could give him a few precious seconds if the bear came close. His breathing steadied as he prepared for another encounter, the weight of his mistake heavy on his mind. Moments later, the bear appeared at the top of the slope, its eyes wild with pain. It sniffed the air, scanning the area for any movement. Ron held his breath, still willing the bear not to notice him. But just as he thought it might move away, the bear's eyes fixed on his hiding spot. In a flash, it barreled down the slope toward him. Ron tightened his grip on the branch, knowing he had only one chance. As the bear charged, he swung the branch, aiming for its face, hoping to disorient it. The bear recoiled slightly, giving him enough time to back away. But it quickly recovered, growling louder and angrier. He knew he couldn't keep this up for long. He was exhausted, and the bear's strength was unmatched. Desperation set in as he turned and ran once more, pushing himself through thick trees and brush. His mind raced with every step, guilt and survival instincts battling within him. The memory of his shot and the consequences of his error haunted him as he moved. But he was still alive and had a chance as long as he kept moving. Finally, after what felt like hours, he heard silence behind him. He slowed down, glancing back. The bear was gone, its form swallowed by the dense forest. Exhausted and shaken, Ron collapsed against a tree, breathing heavily as he absorbed the reality of what had just happened. The forest, once familiar, now felt like an unforgiving judge of his actions. He knew he'd never hunt the same way again, each step guided by the lesson he had painfully learned that day. September 25th, 2024. brought renowned wildlife photographer Lila deep into the rugged terrain of British Columbia, a place she had long admired for its untouched beauty. She was on a mission to capture grizzly bears in their natural habitat, hoping to add breathtaking images to her already impressive portfolio. With years of experience photographing wildlife, Lila was no stranger to dangerous environments. Her assignments had taken her all over the world, from the rainforests of the Amazon to the savannas of Africa. But there was something uniquely daunting about British Columbia's dense forests, where towering trees and thick underbrush created a serene and wild atmosphere. As she moved along a narrow trail, Lila scanned the landscape, eyes trained for movement. The camera felt like an extension of her hands, and she adjusted the lens instinctively, waiting for the perfect moment. She knew that photographing grizzlies was risky, especially a mother with cubs. Yet the allure of capturing such an intimate moment in nature drew her closer than she knew she should have gone. The morning light filtered through the canopy, casting soft shadows across the forest floor, ideal conditions for the shot she envisioned. After hours of patient waiting, her dedication was rewarded. She spotted a large female grizzly with 2 cubs beside her, just beyond a cluster of thick shrubs. The sight was breathtaking. The mother bear was grazing while her cubs played, oblivious to the potential danger surrounding them. Lila adjusted her camera, zooming in, making sure every detail would be captured. But in her excitement, she didn't notice how close she had ventured, stepping out from behind her cover for a better angle. As Lila took her shot, a twig snapped underfoot, echoing through the silence. The sound was enough to draw the mother bear's attention. She lifted her head, her ears twitching, nose twitching as it picked up Lila's scent. Lila's heart pounded as she watched the bear's calm expression shift to fierce protectiveness. She knew enough about bear behavior to recognize the warning signs, and panic began to creep in as the bear's gaze locked onto her. Before she could react, the grizzly charged. The massive animal moved surprisingly quickly, closing the distance between them in seconds. Lila's instinct kicked in and she turned to run, realizing too late how vulnerable she was in this open terrain. Her equipment bag, heavy with lenses and cameras, weighed her down. Desperate, she flung the bag onto the ground, hoping it would distract the bear, if only for a moment. The bear slowed, pausing briefly to inspect the bag, giving Lila a small window to put more distance between them. But the mother bear's interest in the bag was fleeting. Her focus returned to Lila, who was now struggling to navigate through dense bushes, her legs shaking with fear. She knew that bears could run faster than humans. Her only chance was outmaneuvering them through the thick forest. With each step, Lila's breathing grew heavier, and her mind raced as she pushed her body to its limits. She could hear the bear behind her crashing through the undergrowth. Its grunts were a terrifying reminder of how close it was. The rough ground and low-hanging branches scratched at her arms and legs, but she pushed forward, refusing to look back. Lila's body was aching, her energy waning, yet her instincts kept her moving forward. She clambered over rocks, ducked under branches, and wove through trees, using the forest's natural obstacles to her advantage. The sounds of the bear grew faint, but she didn't dare stop or slow down. Lila's body ached from the relentless sprint, her breath shallow and rapid as she pushed through the dense trees of the forest. Her mind raced, processing every sound, every shift in the forest floor beneath her. The bear's heavy steps had faded, but she knew better than to let her guard down. The vast, unyielding wilderness surrounded her, and the chill in the air reminded her how far she was from safety. Each step reminded her of the stark line she had crossed, going from observer to intruder in a world governed by instincts far stronger than her own. She slowed down, carefully placing each foot to avoid another snap or rustle. The forest was now unnervingly quiet, as if holding its breath with her. Her hands were scratched and raw from grabbing branches and rocks in her mad dash for survival. But relief was still far off. The ordeal had left her disoriented. She glanced around, trying to regain her sense of direction, but every tree and shadow looked the same. The trees towered over her, creating a canopy that dimmed the afternoon light, adding to the growing feeling of isolation. Despite the cold creeping into her bones, Lila felt beads of sweat rolling down her back. She took a moment to catch her breath and steady her trembling hands, realizing she had left her equipment bag behind. All her gear, precious cameras, lenses, and supplies were scattered along the trail, likely trampled or left far behind. It struck her how fragile her tools seemed against the raw power of the forest and its inhabitants. Her drive to capture nature's beauty had pushed her to take a risk that nearly cost her life, and now her priorities seemed almost foolish. With each cautious step back toward civilization, Lila's mind drifted to the many scenes she had captured over the years, each photo a testament to the beauty and danger of the wild. But this experience had shifted something deep within her. She was no longer just a photographer looking for the perfect shot. She was a survivor, marked by the encounter, reminded of nature's indomitable will. The line between human and wild felt clearer now, and she realized that respect, not just admiration, was essential in her work. As she slowly went through the forest, Lila heard faint sounds that made her heart race again. But these were different sounds, the distant murmur of a river and the soft rustle of leaves from the wind. She moved toward these comforting sounds, each step a painful reminder of the chase. Eventually, she emerged from the dense thicket and found a small path leading back toward her base camp, each familiar landmark offering relief and grounding. When she finally reached camp, the full weight of the encounter settled in. Exhausted and shaken, Lila sat silently, her mind replaying the bear's charge and her desperate escape. Her work, her passion for documenting wildlife would never be the same. She now understood that every moment spent in the wild required skill, courage, and a profound respect for boundaries. The bear's fierce reaction was a lesson she would carry forever, a reminder that beauty and danger are intertwined in the world she had chosen to capture. That evening, Lila took time to sit and reflect, the stillness around her contrasting sharply with the terror she had just endured. In her heart, she knew she would return to photograph wildlife again, but with a renewed understanding of her place and a humbling respect for the untamed forces that ruled this vast, unpredictable world. September 28, 2024 found Sam and Alex deep in the Adirondacks, the thick forest stretching endlessly around them. They were both seasoned hikers, but had come to the region for an adventure, seeking the quiet and wild beauty only these mountains could offer. Tall and cautious, Sam had always been the planner, mapping every trail and carefully packing their supplies. On the other hand, Alex was more spontaneous, bringing along his love for thrill and curiosity that often led them into unplanned escapades. As dusk began to settle, they realized they had lost track of time, the forest canopy darkening faster than expected. Their only shelter option for the night was an old, forgotten cabin they had stumbled upon near the trail. The wooden structure stood partially hidden by overgrown bushes and fallen leaves, weathered from years of abandonment. Its walls were thin, and the roof sagged slightly, yet it offered protection from the cold that had started creeping in with the evening shadows. The cabin's single room was sparse, with a dusty floor and broken windows that let in the chilly night air. Nevertheless, they quickly settled in, setting down their backpacks and lighting a small lantern to cast a warm glow inside. Hungry from the long day, they rummaged through their supplies, spreading a modest meal on the wooden floor. The smell of canned beans and jerky filled the small space as they ate silently, listening to the sounds of the forest outside. Occasional rustles and distant owl calls reminded them just how isolated they were. Despite the cabin's eerie ambiance, the comfort of shelter brought them a sense of relief. As the night wore on, Sam and Alex prepared to sleep, rolling out their sleeping bags and tucking their food securely in one corner, hoping it would stay safe from any curious critters. Just as they began to drift off, a loud scraping sound shattered the silence, causing them to sit up with a start. They listened intently, hearts pounding, as the heavy footsteps grew louder, approaching the cabin from outside darkness. Sam's mind raced, trying to identify the source, but they both feared what it could mean deep down. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and there was silence for a brief, terrifying moment. Then, with a sudden violent force, the wooden door creaked and groaned as something large pressed against it. They barely had time to react before a massive, dark shape loomed in the doorway, a black bear sniffing and pawing at the entrance, its nose twitching as it picked up the scent of their food. The flimsy door was no match for the bear's strength. With a powerful push, it forced the door open, its claws scraping against the wood as it slowly entered the cabin. Trapped, Sam and Alex scrambled to the back wall, grabbing whatever they could find to defend themselves. Alex gripped a hiking pole tightly while Sam fumbled with a can of beans, desperate to find anything to keep the bear at bay. The bear moved further inside, its eyes fixed on the food in the corner, but its presence left them cornered and trembling. Sam and Alex stood frozen, their backs pressed tightly against the wooden wall, barely breathing as the bear moved closer to their food stash. The scent of their meal had lured it in, and its huge, heavy frame filled nearly half the cabin, blocking any clear path to escape. The bear's massive paws swiped at the pile of food supplies, scattering cans and bags across the dusty floor. Every muscle in Sam's body was tense as he clutched the hiking pole, knowing their only chance for survival was to avoid provoking the bear into further aggression. The bear's powerful jaws clamped down on a can, crushing it effortlessly, its teeth grinding through the metal as if it were paper. Sam's mind raced, trying to remember anything he'd read about encounters with bears. He whispered to Alex, urging him to stay still and avoid eye contact, hoping the bear would remain focused on the food and not see them as threats. The two friends barely dared to move, watching in terror as the bear continued rummaging, seemingly satisfied with the easy meal it had found. But then, with a sudden change in its posture, the bear lifted its head and sniffed the air, its sharp gaze settling on them. The realization that they had nowhere to go struck both men hard. In a desperate attempt to scare it off, Alex threw one of the empty cans across the room. The noise startled the bear briefly, and it paused, giving them a precious moment to move sideways, inching along the wall towards the door. Each step was carefully calculated, as they tried not to draw its full attention back to them. The bear, recovering quickly, turned its massive head in their direction, giving a low growl that shook them to their core. The air felt thick with tension, every second stretching endlessly as the bear took a few intimidating steps toward them. Sam gripped the hiking pole tighter, ready to defend themselves if necessary, even though he knew it was no match for the bear's strength. His heart hammered in his chest as he exchanged a look with Alex, both understanding that this moment could determine their fate. In a stroke of luck, a loud rustling noise came from outside the cabin as something, a falling branch perhaps, caught the bear's attention. Its head whipped around, and to their immense relief, it slowly turned and ambled out of the cabin, disappearing into the forest. The two men stood silently, processing what had just happened, their breaths coming in shaky gasps. The cabin was in disarray, their supplies scattered, but they were alive. Both were deeply shaken as they finally exited, stepping carefully into the night. They realized just how close they had come to disaster. The experience left them scarred but grateful, a chilling reminder of nature's raw power and the fragile boundary between adventure and danger.